Call me Virgil.
Of course, Virgil. How long have you been killing people for a living?
We won't talk about this anymore. What?
Are you? And a woman?
I didn't enjoy it.
Are you telling me that you've never had a woman?
Hell, you ain't even pissed. You know.
Ellie, I don't...
That's what I said. I was just funning you.
Shut up.
No, Virgil!
In 1882, under the harsh sun of New Mexico, a town sheriff rode across the plains with his deputies. Dust swirled around their horses as they approached a man named Randall. The sheriff demanded that he hand over 2 of his men wanted for murder, but the rancher didn't flinch. Without a word of warning, he drew his gun and gunned down the sheriff and both deputies before any of them could react. Miles away, 2 men were making their way through the wide and unforgiving land, Virgil Cole and Everett Hitch. They weren't bounty hunters or outlaws. They were professional lawmen for hire, men who brought justice to towns too broken to protect themselves. Virgil, calm and deadly accurate, had built a reputation as a man who never hesitated when danger called. Everett, once a West Point officer, had traded a soldier's uniform for the freedom of the frontier. Years earlier, he'd saved Virgil's life in a gunfight, and the two had been inseparable ever since. Together, they drifted from one violent town to another, bringing law where chaos ruled. Their next stop was a small settlement called Appaloosa. When they arrived, the town elders explained that the place had fallen under the control of a powerful rancher named Randall Bragg. His men treated the town like their personal territory, robbing, threatening, and killing anyone who stood in their way. The elders told them how the previous sheriff had once tried to arrest 2 of Bragg's cowhands for murder, but Bragg himself had stepped in and executed the lawmen in broad daylight. Since then, fear had taken hold of everyone in Appaloosa. Desperate, the elders begged Virgil and Everett to take the job and bring peace back to their town. Virgil agreed, but he made one thing clear. The town would follow his law, without debate or delay. The elders hesitated, worried that they were trading one ruler for another. But before they could argue, a woman named Tilda burst in, pale and breathless, reporting that Bragg's men were attacking the saloon. The decision was made in an instant. The elders had no other choice. They signed Virgil's agreement, placing Appaloosa under his protection and his command. Virgil Cole and Everett Hitch headed straight for the saloon the moment they heard trouble. Inside, Bragg's men were drunk and tearing the place apart. The 2 lawmen stepped in without hesitation, demanding that the chaos stop immediately. They made it clear. Either the men calm down or they spend the night behind bars. The outlaws laughed it off, refusing to recognize Virgil as the new marshal of Appaloosa. Virgil's tone hardened. He warned them one last time. If anyone reached for a gun, he would shoot. The warning went ignored. In a flash, both Virgil and Everett drew their revolvers and fired. The fight ended as quickly as it began. The men who had mocked them now lay motionless on the saloon floor. Word of the shootout spread fast. The next day, Randall Bragg himself rode into town with his entire crew. Their horses thundered down the main street, sending townsfolk scattering. One of the elders ran ahead to warn Virgil and Everett, who were once again in the saloon. Moments later, Bragg and his men entered, filling the room with silent menace. Virgil didn't wait for introduction. He told Bragg that he was now the law in Appaloosa, and that he knew Bragg had murdered the previous sheriff. Bragg tried to talk his way out of it, but Virgil wouldn't bend. He made it clear that from now on, Bragg's men would obey the new laws or end up in jail, or worse. The rules were written on a notice by the saloon door. Follow the law, and you'll be fine. Disobey, and you'd answer to Cole or Hitch. The meeting ended in cold silence. As Bragg left, Virgil announced that no one in town was allowed to carry weapons anymore. The message was simple and absolute. The days of fear were over. Not long after, a new face appeared in Appaloosa. A woman named Allison French stepped off the train, her calm confidence catching Everett's attention immediately. He followed her at a respectful distance as she made her way to a small cafe, where Virgil happened to be sitting. The stranger politely asked if there was a clean but affordable hotel in town. Yeah, it's a town of 4 buildings, and one of them is the hotel. All right, Virgil told her she could stay at the same place he and Everett were lodging, assuring her it was safe and comfortable. Before she left, he asked his partner to help her settle in. Everett noticed the look in his friend's eyes. Virgil was clearly intrigued. Later that evening, when Everett returned, he mentioned that Mrs. French had asked about the new marshal. That caught Virgil's attention right away. He wanted to know exactly what she'd said. Everett explained that she asked whether he was married, and he gave a vague answer. Virgil's reaction was a mix of irritation and curiosity. Everett, calm as ever, suggested that the lady would probably ask him herself, so he might as well prepare a decent answer. He also mentioned that she preferred to be called Ellie. Virgil didn't deny it. He admitted she had piqued his interest. Both men found the newcomer quietly charming, but Everett noticed how seriously Virgil took the interest and stepped back, choosing not to show any attention. Later, from a nearby hill, the pair spotted several riders watching the town. Sensing trouble, they left at once to check what was happening. On the ridge, the tension rose fast when the strangers made it clear that the sheriff's authority did not reach those parts. Virgil stood his ground and announced that Appaloosa and the surrounding land answered to his law. To prove the point, he struck one of the riders across the face with the butt of his pistol. A hard move meant to end Bragg's power in town. Wanting to help the pianist settle in, the lawman arranged for her to work at the local hotel, trading music for room and board. That night, her playing filled the saloon while the two men sat nearby. She asked about the sheriff's job and suggested that their work often meant killing for money. Virgil corrected her, saying their role was to enforce the law and that death came only as a last measure to restore justice. After a pause, she steered the talk toward his private life. He admitted there had been relationships before, but that now there were none. The exchange hinted at more between them than either openly said. Later, a man in the saloon insulted the bartender while the pianist listened, and Virgil reacted without delay. He struck the offender and kept hitting until Everett stepped in and pulled him away.
I was just funning you.
Shut up.
No, Virgil! Virgil!
A furious Virgil left the saloon, the outburst underscoring how quick he was to defend what he considered right. The next day, a town elder asked Everett about Virgil's behavior and whether the violence had gone too far. Everett calmly explained that Virgil always had reasons for his actions, and that he did not regret what he had done. He told the elder that if the town wanted protection, they would have to accept both the strengths and the faults of the man they had made sheriff. From the office window, Everett later saw a couple kissing in the street and watched for a while, the sight marking time passing in a town that was slowly changing. At breakfast the next morning, Virgil came in unusually cheerful, hinting that things with the pianist were moving forward. The mood shifted when she herself joined them at the table and announced that they planned to buy a house in town to live together. Everett, caught off guard, offered polite congratulations. Their meal ended when a young cowboy burst in with news that he had witnessed Bragg kill the previous sheriff and his deputies. The lawman questioned him carefully and confirmed that he was willing to testify in court. He told them that Bragg had shot the men like rattlesnakes or rats, and he agreed he would stand up in court and tell the whole story, looking Bragg in the eye if he had to. Once they confirmed the young cowboy was ready to testify, Virgil and Everett prepared for the arrest. They rode out to Bragg's ranch before dawn, catching him completely off guard. With guns drawn, they announced he was under arrest. One of Bragg's men fired a shot into the air, raising the alarm, but by the time others arrived, their leader already stood at gunpoint. Bragg, realizing the situation was hopeless, ordered his men to stand down. As they escorted him back through Appaloosa, his riders followed at a distance, silent and watchful, obeying his command not to interfere. When Bragg saw the witness waiting for him in town, his eyes turned cold with rage, and he muttered a promise of death that left the young man shaking. Virgil assured the witness he would be protected, so long as he stood by his word in court. While the outlaw sat behind bars, Virgil turned his focus to building the house he had promised Ellie. But as days passed, she began to complain that his work kept him away too often. Irritated, Virgil asked Everett to check on her and make sure she was doing all right. When Everett arrived, Ellie greeted him warmly and showed him around the half-finished home. Their talk started simple, but soon her tone changed. She began to flirt, saying she felt neglected and asking if he found her attractive. When Everett admitted that she was, she stepped closer and kissed him. For a moment, he kissed her back, then quickly pulled away. He reminded her that she was with Virgil, not him. She whispered that Virgil wasn't there, but Everett stood firm. He told her they both owed loyalty to the same man, and what she was doing wasn't right. Embarrassed and angry, Ellie told him to leave. As Everett stepped out, he spotted several of Bragg's riders heading toward the sheriff's office. Realizing what was about to happen, he hurried there and took his place beside Virgil. The men outside demanded that Bragg be handed over. Calmly, Virgil ordered Everett inside to keep the prisoner covered, then faced the armed group alone. His voice stayed steady as he warned them. If they opened fire, many of them would die before the day was done. His confidence and cold determination broke their resolve. After a tense silence, the men turned their horses and rode away. From across the street, Ellie had watched the standoff unfold. When the danger passed, she ran to the office, shaken but relieved to see both men alive. Everett said nothing about what had happened earlier, choosing to keep the incident to himself. Later that night, he confided in one of the local working women, who warned him that Ellie might twist the story one day and turn Virgil against him. Days later, 2 lawmen arrived in Appaloosa with a traveling judge. They offered to assist with guarding Bragg until the trial, suggesting they could rotate shifts with Virgil and Everett. The sheriff accepted the offer. With Joe Whitfield, the young witness, ready to testify, everything was finally set for Bragg's day in court. Not long after, the Shelton brothers rode into Appaloosa, ruthless, hired guns with a reputation for bloodshed. Virgil recognized them the moment he saw their faces, but his expression stayed calm and unreadable. He reminded them, in his steady voice, that Appaloosa lived by his law now, and that he wouldn't tolerate chaos of any kind. The brothers, aware of who they were dealing with, kept their distance and watched the town closely, waiting for a reason to move. With the streets quiet for the moment, Virgil decided to give Ellie a bit of peace. He took her out of town in a carriage. The day of the trial arrived soon after. Inside the packed courtroom, young Joe Whitfield took the stand and described exactly what he had seen. He told the judge how Randall Bragg shot the sheriff and his deputies without mercy. The defense tried to shake him, but Joe stayed firm. Bragg's men, when questioned, claimed ignorance, insisting they knew nothing of the murders. Bragg himself erupted with anger, accusing Virgil of framing him and calling Joe a liar. Despite his polished manner and smooth words, the judge wasn't convinced. He declared Bragg guilty of murder and ordered him to be executed in another town. The lawmen prepared to transport the prisoner by train, keeping him under heavy guard. Virgil believed the worst was over, but fate had other plans. When the train stopped at a water station, danger struck. From beneath the tracks, the Shelton brothers emerged, guns drawn, faces cold. They held Ellie hostage, forcing everyone to freeze in place. Their demand was simple: release Bragg or she dies. For a long moment, Virgil stood silent, torn between duty and love. Then, with no other choice, he ordered his men to let the outlaw go. The brothers promised to free Ellie once the train moved, but it was a lie. As soon as Bragg was unshackled, they vanished into the desert with both him and the terrified woman. Virgil's fury burned in silence. Without horses, there was no way to chase them immediately, so Everett turned back toward Appaloosa to bring mounts, while Virgil started after them on foot. Hours later, after a long, punishing march, the two reunited and pushed deeper into the wilderness. The land was dry and endless, and the sun hung low over the rocks. Everett looked over, concern in his eyes, and asked quietly how his partner was holding up. Virgil didn't answer right away, but the look on his face said everything. He was tired. Right now, they weren't thinking about heartbreak. They were tracking prey. By the next morning, they spotted movement by the river. A small group had gathered near the water, but at the same time, a band of native warriors began closing in, setting up what looked like an ambush. Realizing Ellie could be caught in the middle, the 2 lawmen charged forward, desperate to reach her before blood was spilled. What they found stunned them both. Ellie was bathing in the river, laughing and flirting with one of the Shelton brothers. The sight cut deep into Virgil's pride, but there was no time to process it. Seconds later, arrows flew and the ambush began. When one of the attackers tried to seize Ellie, Virgil and Everett opened fire. A single shot dropped the warrior's horse, scattering the others and forcing them to retreat. Seeing that everyone was now in danger, Virgil called for a truce with the mercenaries. Both sides agreed to work together until they reached safe ground. The brothers were handed back their weapons to help fight off any further attacks. To ease tensions with the warriors, Everett offered them one of the captured horses as a peace gesture. Later that night, as flames flickered around the campfire, one of the Shelton brothers explained that their loyalty to Bragg had nothing to do with friendship. It was just business. Virgil made it clear that the prisoner remained under his authority, and justice would be served once they got back to Appaloosa. That night, Ellie sat between the 2 lawmen, trembling and tearful. She tried to explain that what had happened with one of the brothers was a terrible mistake, born from fear and loneliness. Virgil's anger flared as the subject turned to Everett. Ellie insisted that Everett had tried to make a move on her, but both men knew the truth. Virgil refused to believe her claim, defending his partner without hesitation. Ellie, humiliated, turned defensive, accusing Everett of unwanted advances. But Virgil stayed calm, his trust in his partner unshaken. He made it clear that the matter was closed. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with betrayal, shame, and exhaustion. By the time they reached a dusty, half-abandoned town, the uneasy alliance was close to breaking. Everyone knew the final showdown was coming. Before it began, Virgil opened up to Everett in a quiet moment. He spoke honestly about his feelings for Ellie, how her charm and warmth filled every room she entered, and how deeply he had wanted to believe in her. But with a weary look, he admitted what he already knew in his heart. A woman like her could never stay in one place for long. Everett, quietly studying the woman's behavior, described her as someone not immoral, but driven by a hunger for power, drawn always to the strongest presence in the room. Virgil listened without interruption, then admitted that none of it changed how he felt. His feelings for Ellie remained steady, and he intended to stand by her no matter what. Everett asked if that meant she only loved him when he was near. Virgil hesitated, then said that maybe it didn't matter. When she was with him, she cared for him. That was enough. Everett wasn't so sure. Soon after, Ellie appeared again, terrified and trembling at the thought of what lay ahead. Both lawmen tried to calm her, telling her that danger was simply part of their lives. When she confessed her fear of losing everything, Virgil promised to protect her for as long as she still wanted him close. It was a tender moment, one that would soon be shattered. At the site where they were meant to meet their escorts, the partners walked straight into a trap. The local sheriff, whom they had trusted, turned out to be kin to the Shelton brothers. Together with Bragg's men, he betrayed them. In an instant, gunfire tore through the quiet air. Smoke filled the open space as bullets flew in every direction. Virgil managed to drop one of the hired guns and the crooked sheriff, while Everett took down the second Shelton brother. Bragg seized the chaos as his chance to escape. He mounted a horse and rode off, leaving the lawman bleeding but alive. Ellie ran to Virgil's side, her face pale with fear as she saw the wound. Somehow, they survived, but nothing would ever be the same again. Time passed. The promised house was finally completed. One evening, Everett spoke with a local woman, asking whether she believed Ellie had ever truly loved Virgil. With a wry smile, she said that men were the only ones who spent their lives wondering about love. Ellie, she explained, was guided by status, not sentiment. She would stay with whoever could give her the life she wanted and move on when someone better came along. Everett sat in silence, the truth hitting harder than any bullet. Not long after, shocking news swept through Appaloosa. Word arrived of a presidential pardon for Randall Bragg. His earlier boasts about powerful friends, dismissed by everyone as desperate lies, had turned out to be true. The murderer, once sentenced to hang, had been granted mercy by President Chester Arthur himself. The lawman could hardly believe it. It wasn't long before the pardoned man returned to Appaloosa. Dressed in fine clothes and wearing the easy confidence of a man reborn, Randall Bragg moved through the dusty streets as if he'd never done wrong. His polished manners and polite smiles worked like armor, deflecting judgment and rewriting memory. That evening, he entered the saloon where Virgil, Everett, and Ellie sat at their usual table. But Virgil didn't budge. His steady gaze cut through the performance, and his reply was short and final. "A killer," he said. Remained a killer. Bragg's jaw tightened, fury flickering beneath his calm mask, but he turned and walked away without another word. Later, Ellie asked why he thought Bragg had returned. Virgil's answer was quiet. Pride. That single word explained everything. The next morning, Virgil met with the judge who had overseen the case. The official admitted there was nothing he could do. The pardon had been issued legally, citing procedural flaws and insufficient evidence. Days later, Bragg opened a grand hotel in the heart of town, a gleaming monument to his so-called redemption. He welcomed guests with charm and grace, pretending his fortune was clean while everyone else knew better. Everett paid him a visit only to receive an offer he hadn't expected. Bragg spoke smoothly about opportunity, power, and the future of Appaloosa. When Everett didn't respond, Bragg hinted that new leadership was on the horizon. It was clear the town's influence had already begun shifting toward him. That night, Virgil and Everett sat down for an honest talk. Everett admitted he saw no future for himself here. The law no longer held the same weight, and the people they'd protected were now standing behind a murderer. Virgil listened in silence, saying only that personal matters bound him to stay. Everett warned him that Ellie might not stay loyal, but Virgil's answer came steady and certain. He was prepared for whatever came, and he wouldn't abandon her. Everett asked if he'd considered leaving town, maybe starting over somewhere new. Virgil said he had, but Ellie was against it. Money was running thin, and life in Appaloosa was closing in around them. Everett reminded him that love could be fleeting, especially when comfort and ambition got involved. Virgil only shook his head, saying he wouldn't give up on her. Not now. That night, Everett saw something that confirmed his fears. From the far side of Bragg's lavish new hotel, he spotted Ellie at the piano, her soft music floating through the lobby. Bragg stood nearby, watching her with a satisfied, possessive smile. Later, Everett saw her walk toward the private rooms upstairs, Bragg following close behind. The sight told him more than words ever could. The balance of power in Appaloosa had shifted, and Ellie had simply followed the stronger man. When their paths crossed briefly in the hotel corridor, there were no words, no accusations, just a silent farewell that spoke of everything already lost. The next morning, Everett visited an old acquaintance to say goodbye. He brought a small parting gift and, over a candid conversation, confessed to something that had haunted him for years. A killing done in anger, outside the law. That single mistake had shaped his life ever since. Now it was part of the reason he needed to leave. Before his departure, Everett walked into Bragg's Grand Hotel one last time. He laid his badge and revolver on the bar, a quiet message that his service as a lawman was over. But Bragg couldn't resist provoking him. A few taunting words led to 2 humiliating blows. The kind no man of pride could ignore. Everett looked him straight in the eye and gave his final choice. Face him in a duel now, or live long enough to meet death later. Furious, Bragg accepted. Word of the challenge spread fast. Virgil arrived at the scene, desperate to stop what was about to happen. But Everett met his gaze and asked him calmly to stand aside. It was the first personal request he had ever made in all their years together. And it was enough. Virgil stepped back. The duel was over in a heartbeat. Bragg barely touched his gun before Everett's shot struck true. The echo faded into silence as he calmly reloaded his weapon, turned away, and left the town behind. As he rode out, the desert wind carried the dust of Appaloosa behind him. Everett knew what he had done. He had ended a threat, preserved Virgil's career, and given his friend one last chance at peace with the woman he loved. Ahead lay only open land and the long, uncertain road of a man once again searching for a place to belong. Thank you for watching. Write in the comments if you also thought the girl didn't appear by accident. It's an interesting story about friendship and about how a woman became part of it. See you in the next videos.